So then the idea.
All right, we're recording, so everybody watching.
We're recording, all right.
You can add, if you want, you can start that question, record that as well. So how is Rico going to know?
Yeah, so how is Rico going to know if the milestones are being met?
So he'll have to contact the fund manager or the study coordinator to find out.
Okay.
So go ahead and, you know, start kind of from. So, you know, the goal would be for someone to be able to do a repeatable process of whatever you're doing so that you can test out what he's billing to make sure that what we're talking about is billed correctly.
Sounds good. So if we pretend that this is a brand new clinical trial, we'll call this, you know, clinical trial, whatever. This is Genentech clinical trial 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm just going to expand all of this just to capture it all. The idea is that this information, award details, would come from COEUS. This would come from COEUS giving some basic information about the trial. The first user, so I'm going to just pick on Rico and say Rico is going to be the one doing all of this. Then Rico would come in here, and it would probably, I think in this case, be defaulted to these elements we're seeing here. Maybe we change a couple of these elements, but this would be, you know, invoicing per milestone or specific task. Great, custom schedule, the template. But maybe we have a couple templates here. Maybe one says health sciences, or maybe you want one per department. I think one for health sciences is the way to go. Okay, so then we'll just have that one template. So that makes those choices really easy. Then he could come in here and he's going to say, I want to add in my milestones or my reminders for the elements that are in that budget, in that agreement. So he's going to say, okay, I have no clue when anything is going to happen, but I just got it today, so I'm going to take a best guess and assume that the first thing we're going to need to bill is the IRB fees. I have to start at least in tomorrow, and I'm going to say IRB fees $1,000. Then I'm going to add, I either add by clicking that or hitting tab or clicking that. Then after that, Rico's going to guess that it's going to take a couple of months to get the first patient. So on July 10th, let's say 10 patients enrolled, and I get $500 per patient. So I'm going to estimate $5,000. Then in another month from there, let's say, so I can also type in the date, or I could scroll through. Another month, I think we're going to have an MRI test completed, and that's going to be $1,500.
And that's going to be $1,500 for each of the enrolled patients, or
this one might be just this singular test.
Okay.
I think this is going to be the total amount that you want the invoice amount to be. So this column could almost just say invoice amount, what you're expecting that invoice to be.
Okay.
Our idea is that from here, or one of these, we have a button that says copy, and maybe it's another pop-up that says copy X amount of times, or copy every quarter through X period of time, or copy for every month. And it just, I would think, almost just literally duplicates everything, makes a long list. So now you have a really, really long list here, but then it's still editable so that then Rico can go in and say, okay, this is actually going to be for 20 patients or 50 patients, or, you know, or maybe it's just check system for patient, whatever that thing is, that automated system when they get logged in the database and the checks just arrive. Right, so just kind of estimating. These are all just best guesses because we have no idea what's going to happen, right? So we build this all out, however many we have. We can keep adding and adding and adding. And we're going to say 09, 07, 2017.
And at this point, we don't need to build in the functionality for an auto calculation where you enter the number of patients and the price per item, and it comes up with the total for that row.
Right. I don't think so.
We're okay with the amount of deals that are here.
That's what we're saying right now as a
Maybe
very simple, just get something out there.
Sounds good.
And then let's say our final, let's say in another year, we're gonna say 2018, we need to bill for IRB renewal. And that's gonna be $100. And then,
So for the periodic, so we talked about making a hybrid of milestone and periodic, in which we do the row copy. You're saying it'd be good to have the ability to do that replication at any one line. You then replicate it down, and then you can choose later on whether you want to replicate other ones as well. You just do that within that particular row. You have an option of either monthly or quarterly from that date as you default, and then you can change the dates that are created, and
Yep.
as well as the description.
yep,
Okay, and email.
yep.
Cool.
So then when you're all done, I will say from a would be nice standpoint going forward, see how there's 0 defaults in the beginning. It's not that big of a deal, but kind
Kinda
of
weird.
aesthetically, it's like,
It doesn't really
yeah, we can make that go away.
do any benefit. Yeah, that should definitely go.
So then when we're all said and done, we're gonna hit save and say, yes, this is what we think it's gonna be through the life of it. There's 2 years worth of reminders, milestones. So these are really the milestones. So now what's gonna happen is overnight, I was gonna see if I have something in my email. Overnight, an email is gonna get generated. This email is going to be sent to the UCSD contacts. It's going to get sent to Shay Mendoza, David Grayson, and then there's going to be a CC to Marissa Goyette in this case. So I'm thinking this is kind of like where Rico would be. And then this would be the department person. This is maybe Pascal. We'll pick on Pascal. Let's see, this is QA. So I'll even show we can edit this to be Pascal Bernard. Oh, not Bernard. Anyway. Yeah. All right, I won't change it. But you could edit this, be this, whoever it is. We'll consider that this is Pascal. So whoever those contacts are. So then when the batch job runs tonight, I thought the way batch job, when that runs tonight, an email is going to go out to Pascal and copy Rico, and it's going to say, hi Pascal, has milestone for IRB fees for $1,000 been reached? It shows them, it's kind of a line after line. It says IRB fees are $1,000. Please let me know. Thank you, Rico. Okay. So it defaults that language, and that email goes out to Pascal. Now at this point, we're outside of the system. So let's assume now, tomorrow morning, Pascal gets that, oh yeah, totally. We met that last week. Wonderful, great, thanks so much. He writes back to Rico in email, and offline Outlook email, not part of Sparko. Then Rico is going to come in and say, great, I got my email from Pascal. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to create this invoice. But before I create it, well, no, we'll go create. Okay, so we're going to create this. It's created. I'm going to go through 2 different scenarios. So this is one, yes, Pascal said I can create it. It's created. Invoice queued for creation. It says, please check your dashboard. We can now change this language.
Does create, is create only an option? Is create always an option for all of the lines, or only?
Only the next one.
Only the next one in line?
Yep.
And you can create it before the task date if you want to?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you can. But that might be something, I'm not sure if we need it. So if you need, let's say this MRI test, if I needed to build it sooner, then I could just come in here and make this be earlier than 10. I'm going to hit save. It's not going to pop it up to the top. So that would be how it, if your ordering was off.
So it's sorted by task date, and the first one is the one that says create, or whichever one has not yet been built in.
Yep.
In order.
You got it.
Okay.
So even if the email went out for the one on 7/10, and we received a notification saying, yes, go ahead and build it. Now that we changed the ones to the top, what would happen to them? When a notification go out again, to an email will go out again?
Yes. Yes, because because this really is independent from your email. So if Rico gets the email but doesn't do anything with it for a week, and this date pops up again, it'll send. But there's only one reminder that goes at this date, right? So if we've already gotten the notice that yes, we can bill one of these things, another email isn't going to go out unless we've changed that date to something in the future. Okay. So when it's created, it does a couple of things. One, it creates the invoice, which is where I'm going to go now, but it does also, even before that, when the reminder email goes out with the batch job, there is a notification that shows up on Rico's dashboard that says, check for milestone reached, is I think the language of that action item. So that's on his dashboard knowing, oh, okay, that email went out. I'm waiting for a response from Pascal. So if that sits there for too long, then he probably needs to get on the phone and call Pascal, find out. Maybe all he needs to do is come in and change the date. Pascal's like, no. I need another month. Great, just push it off for another month. When he then pushes it off for another month, now we're rescheduling that. Now a new email is going to go out at that date. So now I'm going to come look at the invoice that we created. So it's going to take us over here to the invoices. This is where I miss my drum roll. Okay, so now we're going to come down here. Here's our invoices in review. So this is the $1,000 one is what we just created. We pushed that create button. It creates this line here. So we can see our date here. In here, the period doesn't really make any difference. It's really just kind of that date. The amount, it auto-generates invoice numbers.
The invoice period in that last column adjusts if you change the date of the reminder ahead of time, right?
Yep. Yep, and you can also edit it here if you want. For this template that we have, the invoice period does not actually print on the invoice because for these it doesn't really matter. It's the invoice date itself that matters, but the period doesn't really matter.
Because we could have started at any point.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and the period is really there for stuff outside of this, outside of the clinical trials when it's really we're billing for, March expenses. Okay. So then we come in here, and ideally for this, what we're building here, it would default to the freeform equivalent or tab. This freeform is some sort of plugin that works a lot like Word. Ideally, this would be a little bit more grid-like and could potentially either take a copy and paste from Excel to keep that structure, or would at least allow a user to structure it with maybe some tabs and that kind of clear, clean formatting. If we click in this, we can now edit this. Maybe we want to say, oh, IRB fees, that doesn't sound overly professional. It's like IRB fees for PI, X, Y, Z, whatever. So we can edit the wording as much as we want. And we're going to hit save. We already had said it was $1,000. We know our IRB fees are standard amount. Oh, yes, we have some checks in here for the dates.
Take it back up. There
we go. The reason some of these date checks are in here, let's refresh that. It had a lot to do with the scheduling and the milestones, and to make sure that things didn't get kind of out of whack with the just with the notifications. That's why it's kind of like that. Well,
does it work if you click somewhere in the white area first and then? So
there we go. There we go. I forget with this code merge, they had to make a change to that plugin. I don't know if that's the right word, but we're gonna look at the invoice first, just to make sure it's what we really like. You wouldn't necessarily have to do this. I think it's just good practice when you're getting used to it or if you've changed something. I love our kids. Going home always clears everything to be better.
Right, so I saw the new, utility interface for the new department.
Yeah.
So we'll just use the same interface. Which is great.
It is, that is this one. I mean,
Is it?
this is this. Yep. Okay, so then from here, I'll pull up the PDF again, but then the behavior from here, what we currently have is that you would approve this invoice saying, yes, this is true and correct, I'm happy with it. And then you would go ahead and email it to whoever we have as that sponsor contact. So this would be Rico, then it would be coming from Rico. We can default whatever subject line information we would want, you know, to whoever, right? And then we could say, you know, hi, please pay, or whatever. And then we have, you know, I would say from Rico, or whoever. So then we could send that. I'm not going to for now because we're in QA, kind of get the idea. But here's what the invoice would look like. And this part is all browser specific, but it pulls up. So this is where instead of saying business and financial services, it would say, you know, health sciences. We could use their new logo. Pretty much everything else kind of, I think, would be similar. Here's where we see that IRB fees. So had we had more text there, that's where more of the text would show up. This part, all in here, we do not need the amount we need, but this certification we don't need for this. And then here's that total amount. Okay, so that would be sort of the straightforward path. Now let's go to another scenario where we've set up this MRI test completed, and we guessed it was $1,500, but maybe there was 2 of them completed. Who knows? So this, let's say it's July 7th already, and this auto email goes out from Rico to whoever we have as our UCSD contact and says, hey, has milestone for MRI test completed been reached for $1,500? And they get an email back and it says, yes, this has been completed. Rico goes, awesome, I'm gonna go ahead and create this. While he's creating it, maybe he gets a call from Pascal that says, oh, I totally forgot to tell you, we actually had 2 MRI tests. And so the amount isn't $1,500, it's actually now $3,000. And so then Rico has to say, okay, well, I've already created my invoice for $1,500, now I need to change the amount to $3,000. Right now, this functionality, I'll show you current day functionality, but this needs to be more streamlined for the user, for what we're designing this for. Right now, will come in here, all right, we need to change this amount. I think for what we're designing, if there was a way to just make this field editable, that's probably going to be the easiest. Right now, though, what we do is we go into detail expenses. We have to say new sub, this is a sub account. So this is if we were actually adding a specific ledger expense, that's why these are all here. But for this, what we're billing, since we're not billing anything on the ledger, it's totally meaningless. So we're gonna say $3,000. And then I have to choose another kind of sub under that. This is all about the ledger, account codes, and categories. Meaningless for this. We hit save. But this is now going to change this amount to 3,000. There we go. It gives me that same date issue it's mad at me for, but we saw that before, so that's okay. Got that. Today. That.
And then,
Oh. What do you want me to do?
I think it doesn't change it until, I'll get it with that now, sorry.
Okay. So that would be to change the amount. And let's say maybe now we want to change some words to, now we want to say it was 2 tests completed. So MRI test completed, and we're going to say patient 1, $1,500. This is where it'd be nice, if I hit the tab key, it's not tabbing within this. So this is where I think that formatting for this, for Rico, right, is going to need to be
Yeah, we just have a table in there.
a table, perfect.
And I think when you have a table, I think it allows you to automatically paste it from Excel. We can try to make that happen.
Let's say we want it to look like that.
So Marissa, all the communication happens outside of Spark.
It
Is there a
does.
way that we could add this, yes, approved, example, didn't happen?
I do think we could.
The routing component.
Kind of the routing
Like
component.
a workflow or something. that
Yep.
we could actually do.
So in our first spec, the routing wasn't in there,
Correct.
right? Okay. So we
Yeah.
could add that
Yeah.
later on.
And I might as well show what potentially that could look like with current functionality.
Okay.
So then here we go. Here's this. Now you can see that changed language we have. Here's that $3,000.
Okay, Marissa, like, can you change the like invoice amount after the invoice is created and sent out?
Yes, that's what we just looked at.
Yeah.
Not, oh, after it's sent out.
Yeah.
So that's different. So that after it's created, yes. After it's sent out, yes, but it's different. So let me show you that. So that is what we would call a revision. So in this case, okay, so this one I haven't done anything. It's still in review status. I can change anything I want in review status. Once I hit approve, this status is going to change to approved. Now, this is something, do you still want all these steps, review, approved, delivered? You may or may not want all 3 of those steps. I will say for us, what has been useful, when it's in approved, we have a back-end tool that we can change it back to review. Once it goes to delivered, it really is locked down because that's the flag that's used to then push it into the ISIS file. So we don't want to change anything at that point because then it messes up your ISIS entry. Approved it. Oh, it doesn't. All right. Okay. Let me. Now you're going to see some of the other checks and balances we have in here. So it does make us approve things in order. That's something for this that may or may not be as important. For us, it has been important because we want to go. We need things to go in order. That may or may not be as important here, but that is kind of that built-in functionality. The other thing it's not going to let me do is I can't delete invoices. I can't delete, like I would not be able to delete these 3 invoices because this one is here. So you have to kind of do everything in order. That we built in. Let me see if this is going to, oh, I know what I'll do. To show you the revision, no, this is going to be a bad example for this. I'll just go through this step by step. Okay. So now I'm going to mess with this one. It's not that $3,000 one. We're just looking at, but the concept is the same, right? So, it's approved, so I'm gonna go ahead and email this. Since we're in QA, it's not gonna go here, but I always like to change it just because I get a little paranoid. Okay, so it's been sent, that's great. Now this status is gonna change to delivered. So this delivered status is what's gonna push it into that ISIS file and also locks it from any changes. You can't do anything. So now what we're gonna do, we're up here, we're gonna create a revision of this invoice. So we're saying, you know what, sorry, my bad, I wanna change this particular invoice. So we're gonna check mark here, and we're gonna say create revision. Confirm. And now it's gonna create invoice 16025A0044R1, first revision. So it basically, as I understand it from how it kind of works back, it just does an exact copy of it and makes it repeat. So now you can edit it. So then from here you say, oh, you know what, I want it to actually be 600. And I'll show you now that I've kind of already messed with this amount, now it's already here. There's a couple less clicks, not by many, but it also prompts, we probably don't need this prompt in what we're doing, but this prompt is to show you, do you want to change the cumulative amount going forward? In these, we're not actually tracking a cumulative amount, so it doesn't matter. Option 1 says yes, update the cumulative on the invoices ahead of, in the future that are in review. Option 2 says no, I'll manually update those as needed. But like I said, with what we're doing, the cumulative doesn't matter at all. So, but you get the idea here. So the thing is with the revision, I do think we have this in the original scope. DC didn't want it in the original scope. But here's the other piece of the revision. Once you complete that revision, so that first one is now in ISIS. That's a record in ISIS. This revision, now once you complete and deliver it, it's going to go to ISIS as well. You need something to make this original one go away. Right now, currently today, we do this manually in our office, which with it being centralized in your office, you could as well. It's not hard. It's just a totally different process. What we built in, thinking at that time it was going to be department people doing it, we knew that they wouldn't be able to make this ISIS correction. So it'd be nice for this to do the ISIS correction as well, which basically means that it's just going to have to design another ISIS file. It's just in a different format than the positive input is. It would be a negative input. The real problem with at least the way that the current batch file is that we use, it's ARZ700, is the batch job, it requires the original ISIS transaction number for the original transaction they are trying to reverse. So that's why we didn't put it in our original SparkGum, is because we didn't want CC and Robert to spend all this time designing a batch job, basically, or designing a file format for batch job. We did put it in scope for this, but it might be something now that it's going to be centralized. If it's something that, in the case of revisions, basically you just have to do them through a separate process to clear that original entry.
Isn't it that like new invoice amount in debit hour, that revision, that ISIS automatically recognize this is the revision of this invoice?
It would be nice, but it doesn't.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's, it's two separate systems. So either we need to tell ISIS, but ISIS doesn't. It's two.
And the ISIS part is all mainframe, so it's really, really time consuming for them to do any work on that, because everything is like, all the interactions with it. I mean, there's web services as well, but I think the main way that we're dealing with it is through files that get shipped back and forth, and then it looks at every single column. So everything you do to interact with ISIS, it's looking at like which character column is in, so it gets really tricky to do customization of that stuff.
But this means that to change the one invoice, we have to send out 2 other invoices
Yeah.
One is the negative, one is the new invoice.
Yep, you got it. So that's just something to keep in mind with the revision. I will say though, they have been doing some, they hired a new contractor to do some stuff with ISIS. And some of the stuff they're looking at is, it's not this exactly, but it's not too far off from it either. So we might have more opportunities now just because they're doing more work on that side anyway.
Yeah, they have this layer called Ivory Web Services, which sits on top of the mainframe, which I honestly don't know if we're using any of that, but that's probably something we should look at because.
We're not for this.
Okay.
Because Ivory Web Services is real-time updates, and to post these invoice transactions, it has to be a batch job that's done overnight.
Okay.
So, although for the revision side, that potentially could be an Ivory Web Service because from the mainframe side, I'm going to call it the positive invoices have to be done in a batch job overnight because of just how everything runs and all of that mainframe stuff. But the negatives, that ARZ 700 job, they actually do run that during the day for us. They run it just whenever we submit the file. We have to CC the file to them.
Okay.
And they run it during the day, which if they run during the day, it probably means a web service situation.
Yeah, like we are just like sending this invoice, the ISIS detail code using that job, right? Like overnight, not using the reverse service.
But so for this, we should talk to the people on the mainframe side to see if we could do revisions through Ivory Web Services. And if we can, then we would develop it here and we would kind of borrow that code and put it back in Sparkum for revision there.
Okay.
So it
Which
could
would be very
it
cool.
would be an opportunity
Yeah.
to make improvements in the other direction of the rest of the Sparkum.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, it's good. I think
That'd be easier to manage than a batch job.
Yeah.
yeah.
It'd be great. It really would be great because it is cumbersome to sort of manage. You know, you're managing everything in here, and then you have to manage something else over here. Sometimes people forget, so things like that. I do know so that the job that runs that ARZ job, I do know that job very well. I do understand the logic of it very well and the structure format of that file job. I worked with the mainframe programmer when she developed it, so we help with that. Okay, does that cover? I think that covers actually all of the scenarios that we talked about. Is there anything else that we talked about? Kind of editing before, whether it be changing the amount, the description, the dollar amount. So editing before is really easy, and then editing here, the amount is cumbersome for a user, for an end user.
And like, where did you use this like schedule link, like quarterly, monthly? Let's talk about it.
Yeah. So what I'm thinking is that it would be, you know, maybe another button over here that says duplicate, something like that, copy. Maybe another pop-up or something that says, oh, do it monthly, copy, you know, create 10 copies of
I
it.
mean, the previous billing and schedule template.
Uh-huh.
There we have like quarterly limits, right? So giving title.
Uh-huh.
So
Yep.
where do you use like this things? Like
You mean in which situation?
yes, exactly.
Okay.
So for what we're designing here, right? Well, so actually it's just as it is today, the current functionality, each one of these is an either or. So you can only choose one, right? You're billing either monthly or quarterly or this quarterly or custom, okay? So the reason we would do quarterly is if we have a sponsor that says, here's an award for $200,000. Bill us every calendar quarter $25,000. Okay, great. So it's like I don't care about anything else. Just sorry, that one would be more of an 80. So that would be forget that. The quarterly would be, it's just like our monthly, so it is cost reimbursable. It is pulling costs in from the ledger, but it's doing it 3 months at a time instead of 1 month at a time.
Okay.
So it's
Just
just,
pulling costs from the ledger. So
Yeah.
it's different than
Yeah.
what we're trying to do.
yes. So,
It's much more complicated as well because it's not only pulling costs from another system, but it's also generating the invoice automatically as opposed to just sending a reminder to look at
Yeah.
it and decide if you want to create the invoice through the UI.
Yep. These three, all three of these right here, pull expenses from the ledger and the system automatically generates that invoice at that schedule when the ledger is closed.
Like, I was just confused about two panels.
Yeah.
Because like one we have only milestone panel, but then also we have here choice different living business. Like if you only choose the milestone from here, then the second panel will show up. Otherwise, the first in this case, all the panels will be like next, right? And I really still need the second panel.
I think we would only need one panel, right?
I think for what you're building for this, one panel is sufficient. Because they're really all gonna be invoicing per milestone, is what we're saying here, which is always gonna be custom schedule, which is always gonna be this health sciences template. So you could just default all of that and maybe just display it here at the top of something that looks like this. Because I think all of that is just, unless we consider any future design, it makes sense just to have separate, but I think for what we're doing, it's always good, you know, it's, because right now it's not context specific.
And I have only one last
Yeah.
question is that, like, where do you add like expense file and budget, and how do you use them? And like expenses and budget to create invoice? Do you use them or?
So right now, in our current world, we do, I'll show you an example of that, which I think what we're saying right now is that adding that in for this project is probably a later phase. I think we're really saying, forget about putting all of that in here now and just type what it's gonna be and go for it. But here's how we use it otherwise. We only use it on our cost reimbursable ones. So for our cost reimbursable, I'm gonna just make it, I'll make it quarterly, since we've been talking about quarterly. And I'm gonna do it on the calendar quarter. And it's gonna be our 4-column invoice. I'm gonna save this. By saving this, it's gonna make all of this go away. So if you ever go back into QA and you're looking for this, it probably won't be here because I'm changing it. Okay. Then these two panels down here, edit invoice categories and budget details, these come into play. So these are our standard cost categories. So I'll show you 2 examples. The first one, these are our standard cost categories, great. These match our ledger categories. That's where this comes from. This is a very standard template in sponsored research of categories that we build. So if we have one template, those categories, that's what this would look like. Then the user comes in here and they say, okay, our budget for personnel is $100,000, benefits is $50,000, $5,000, no equipment, no travel, no subcontracts, none of that. And then our IDC is going to be, $10,000. It does this subtotaling math, which helps to make sure that we're keying things correctly, and we hit save. Great. So now here's our budget, and it matches. So now when the invoices are created, I should pick a different example, but that's okay. We're going to make this work. So now the system, when the ledger closes, it's going to automatically create an invoice, and it's going to automatically put it in these categories and display it with those budget amounts that I just did. So I'm going to create a brand new invoice. Let's see if this will work. Oh, all right. It wants me to complete the setup. So because I changed the schedule, it makes me recomplete this. Because that's where that scheduling happens, is when we hit complete. Then that's what triggers it to reschedule. I'm going to create a new invoice. Because normally we would be using the same fund for both examples, but since we're just playing. Once again, since we're in our test environment, I don't know I don't know what expenses we have in here or not. So I'm just going to choose December because I think it is a month that is in here. I think it's more recent, but I'm not sure. So in this case, the invoice period really matters because this is what's telling the system what period to pull ledger expenses from. So I've told it I'm going to care about December. I'm now going to reset invoice from ledger, which tells it to pull everything in from the ledger. So the system would normally do this. I'm just now manually recreating the steps that the system does at ledger close. Cross our fingers. All right. So see this budget column? It's those numbers I just typed in. So that's where that budget comes in. And then this is straight from the ledger. So now it's doing this math for us for what the variances are. And so then when I print it, that's what it looks like. That's where that budget is. The other thing I'll show you that we have is, let's say you don't like those categories. You said, no, I don't like all those. That's way too many. I can change that. I come in here to edit invoice categories. I reset to default, which basically pulls in what our default is. And I say, you know what? I don't like this category. I want to delete it. And I don't like this category either. I'm going to delete it. And these are all tied in with the ledger expenses. So by me editing this, if this were for real, because it's tied in with ledger, it will change how it groups expenses, how it pulls it in, how it displays it from the ledger. I also have the ability from here to move this category up. I also from here can edit this and I just say benefits. Or I say, I want this to say people, whatever the case is. So I save that. Now it's going to be different. So I've eliminated a couple things. I've changed the wording on a couple of things. I now notice how down here it's changed to this to match. I now would have to put in my budget again because this has changed and it ties them together. You know, if we don't have it there, then it says I don't know what you want. So it does match it on that exact description. So now I've changed it. I've changed our budget. I've changed our categories. I'm going to go back over to our invoice. And I'm going to reset from ledger again. And this is going to basically just recreate that whole invoice, but it's now going to take into account that changed budgetary items that I did. Okay, so now see it looks a little bit different, different categories. So apply that change. You want to look at workflow?
Yeah.
All right, so I think for the workflow, so thinking about the communicating within the system, I think that either the intercampus workflow or our current FER workflow could potentially work, maybe be tweaked a little bit. So I'm kind of thinking on the fly here, but there's a couple of things actually. So we do have a supervisor workflow, which in this case, what happens is in our office, I'm a supervisor. Let's say I'm a supervisor, you're the accountant. So actually, we'll do this with Rico and you. That'll be easier. Okay. So Rico creates the invoice. He then hits, approve. It would then go into your queue as a supervisor to review. You can review and approve it. If you approve it, it then goes back to his queue for him to send to the sponsor. So we do have that workflow in there, and that is managed through the contacts, through UCSD contacts. So how does it know who the supervisor is? It's because that's who we have in that panel for UCSD contacts. So that one might be a little bit tricky, I think, to use for this, thinking about, okay, would your workflow be
Rico to a department user and then they, kind of send it back. That might be a little bit more complicated because of the contact piece, but that is one thing that we have. So we do have that supervisor. But then for the intercampus, this might be hard to show all from here, but I can talk it through and have some examples. So with intercampus, the workflow is the other campus uploads an invoice and they have the opportunity to do notes. That goes into a workflow for the department to review. They then just have a button for approve or deny. If it approves it, it goes into our accountant's bucket or like Rico's bucket. So that isn't quite what we're saying either. We're really talking about email notifications back and forth. We don't have anything 100% that way, actually, now that I'm talking about.
Because I'm thinking more like marketplace, how you have, you send out a, hey, this is waiting for your approval. type of thing.
Yeah, I don't know how marketplace works. But I guess I could think about it more like the concept, is it more like the concept of like our ticketing services, like ServiceNow or Footprint or something, where like you kind of can email out of it, but you can use your Outlook email to go into our Salesforce even. That thing sort of, that's kind of what, I think that's kind of what you're thinking of. I don't know, marketplace, you don't know those.
We can, yeah,
But-
we can do routing later.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't have any specific email like that. The closest we get is,
We'll have to shut it down in about 3 minutes before the call at that phone. So we can do another recording later.
that's okay, I think this covers it. I'll just show you the one email part that we have. I don't think it quite gets how you want it, but it might get some ideas going. But we can, out of the system, when we reject something, it creates an email that goes out. And that's in the timeline. And then we also have notes. So it doesn't quite get there, but that's as close as we have right now. So this is something, if we, so we have notes, and these notes are kind of shared by everybody. So that's kind of out there, but it's not tied in with email. But then with this one, oh, I don't have a good example of one. So like instead of approve, there's ones that have a reject, basically with a downward arrow, and it'll pop up in email box for you to say, oh, this is rejected, but it's like a one-time. Okay, there we go.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks so much. That's going to be really helpful.
Oh, good. Good, good.